Good morning and welcome. My name is Reverend Greta Joe, and I use she, her pronouns, and I serve here at Fountain Street Church as your assistant minister. Whether you are joining us here in person in the pews, or whether you are joining us virtually from your couch, or your bed, or your kitchen table today, or maybe, a couple of days from now, because Sunday got away from you, you are welcome. I want to take a brief moment to just orient you to the space, if perhaps it is your first or one of your first times here. As part of our community safety protocols, we do ask that you wear a mask at all times within the building that covers both your nose and your mouth. If you need one, the ushers or the greeters will be happy to help you. I also want to affirm that we are at a difficult point in this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, where the choices about what is safe for you and your loved ones might feel complicated. So whether you chose to join us in person or whether you chose to stay home, and whether or not that decision changes week to week, you are still a welcome member of our community, and we are grateful that you are joining us. Thank you for taking care of yourself and each other. Our service today is centered around reproductive justice. And before we get rolling, I want to just state that there are people for whom this is a personal, sensitive, and hard topic. If that's you, I want to invite you to take care of yourself. If that means a deep breath, if that means that you need to go out and exit our shared space for a little bit and then rejoin us, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, please do. And thank you for being here. We'd like to offer one more word of welcome this morning in the words of Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here.
If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, asexual, or resist labels completely,
you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here.
If you are confused about your sexuality, if you have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one,
you are whole and welcome here. If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, have AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here.
If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault,
you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or had sexual behaviors that you regret, you are whole and welcome here.
Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are.
You are whole and welcome here. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. Thank you, good morning, and welcome.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Christopher here at Fountain Street Church. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the pleasure of serving as the acting senior minister here. This morning's reading comes to us from the Reverend M. Barclay from the cooperative resource and flesh that enriches and enhances our liturgy often here at Fountain Street Church. Hear what the contemporary witness is saying to us this morning in her prayer on choosing abortion. God is not a judge who sits at a distance, shaking his finger at us about divine rules and regulations. God is within, like a whisper, like a question, like a knowing and a rising. God lures us towards each other, towards collective flourishing, towards power growing from the margins, towards our roots deep, deep within the earth. God pulls us in every direction that serves love and that serves life. Sometimes that direction is abortion. When a woman or a trans man or a non-binary person with uterus becomes pregnant and must decide how best to foster life, their own and that of their family, and that of this earth breaking under our burdens, God knows for many there are such few choices available in this, available within these racist, classist, and cis-sexist systems. The God of the fringes, the impoverished, the oppressed, condemns every form of coercion and every act of control over the bodies of those who ask all the right questions of life and of autonomy and futures and collective well-being under all the wrong systems that abandon and judge and isolate and weigh down. Let us not grow weary in claiming our power, in professing and practicing our solidarity, in sharing our resources, and in following the one from whom the margins cry, "Come and follow." Friends, the sanctuary that we share, this one that we create together, is a container for all of our stories. The ones we share and the ones we hold close and quiet to our hearts. The stories that bring us joy and fulfillment, and the stories that break us open. The stories that change and grow us, and the stories that we outgrow and leave behind. Each and every one of you, each of you and every one of you carries a lifetime of stories every single time you enter this space. This morning, there may be stories from your life that surface in unexpected ways. We would like to invite you into a ritual to hold space for your story, whatever that story may be. And if you need support after this service, please do not hesitate to reach out to one of us. As we light this series of candles here, there are 6 of them. We will hold them up as different paths that we have taken. And if you recognize yourself in one of these prayers, we invite you to put your hand over your heart, wherever you are, and know that you are not alone. There is someone else in this community or at home who is holding the hand over their heart too. We light the first candle for those whose story includes the choice to end a pregnancy. The circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but each and every end is also a beginning. And so we light this candle for all who have aborted a pregnancy or partnered someone in an abortion for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
As I light each candle, I invite you to join me in silence or verbally with this response. May the beginnings and endings in our story be held in unconditional love and acceptance. One more time. May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
We light this second candle for those whose story includes the unwanted loss of pregnancy or struggle with fertility. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our life are diverse, but the pain of infertility, miscarriages, and stillbirth are often held in silence. And so we light this candle for all who have traveled for this path of loss, whatever reason, and under whatever circumstances.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held with unconditional love and acceptance.
We light this third candle for those whose story includes the choice to give birth. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse, but the choice to bring new life into the world is a powerful one. And so we light this candle for all who have given birth or partnered in the birth of a child, or those who have adopted a child birthed by someone else, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held with unconditional love and acceptance.
We light the fourth candle for those stories who include the choice not to conceive or have children. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse, but the freedom to chart the course of our own reproductive life is sacred. So we light this candle for all who have made the decision not to conceive or bear children, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held with unconditional love and acceptance.
We light the fifth candle for those whose story includes a forced choice or no choice at all, or who have encountered violence where there should have been tenderness and care. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse, but not everyone has been in the position to control their reproductive choices. We light this candle for all who have found themselves unable to exercise their own sacred reproductive freedom, for whatever reason and under whatever circumstances.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held with unconditional love and acceptance.
We light this sixth and final candle for those whose reproductive story is still being written. The circumstances may vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but the future unfolds in surprising and unexpected ways that can be both beautiful and heartbreaking. And so we light this candle for all who are at the threshold, who have agency and choices still to make about their reproductive lives, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held with unconditional love and acceptance.
May the flames of these candles and the many stories they represent remind us of the fire of commitment that we carry inside of ourselves to ensure that all people have the freedom and the agency over their reproductive choices, and that reproductive justice is upheld as a fundamental right for this and for all future generations.
I'm grateful to Julia Hamilton for that ritual of reproductive choice. January 22nd, i.e. yesterday, was the 49th anniversary of the passage of Roe v. Wade, the landmark legislation that upheld the fundamental right to choose your own reproductive care, including abortion. 49 years. But most experts agree that by this time next year, we will not be celebrating 50 years of reproductive justice. And instead, we may be mourning the overturn of Roe v. Wade at the highest court. With the rise in the concerns over the protection of reproductive health, there has been an uptick in vocal and visible protests and demonstrations in support of reproductive justice and abortion rights. I see some pink hats with us today. I attended one along with several other Fountain Streeters just a few months ago in October here in Grand Rapids. It was hosted by Allie the Activist and Justice for Black Lives. I wore pretty much this outfit. It's a shirt from the National Network of Abortion Funds that says, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. And my stole says, side with love. I was shocked by the number of people who were visibly and vocally surprised that someone in a collar and a stole was at a reproductive rights march. It broke my heart. So, like any good millennial, I wrote about it on social media. I posted a picture of myself in this getup, and it had a very long, caption that accompanied it that really boiled down to, "You are loved. You are loved." It sort of went into the ether like most of my social media posts until earlier this month. Then the post somehow got on the radar of a bunch of anti-choice people. And I suddenly woke up to a barrage of comments from individual accounts with hateful and even threatening messages. "You will burn in hell for your crimes." "Disciple of Satan." "Disgusting." "Disturbing." I had several friends check in with me if I was okay after this slew of messages had died down, and I assured them that I was, that I am. But as I tried to write this sermon, those nasty comments kept coming back in my brain, in my heart. Partially because I knew that what I said and what I experienced from those comments was so minimal in comparison to what so many experienced. And what was disturbing? That I had the audacity to say that everyone is loved? If the anti-choice folks' goal was to convince me to abandon my pro-choice convictions, they failed miserably. Their comments made me even more convinced than ever of the need to be public and proud in my unwavering conviction that every body, every choice, every person is sacred and loved. Because it clearly needs to be said again and again and louder and stronger until it is no longer a disgusting or disturbing thought. This congregation has a history of financially supporting reproductive choice through the Choice Fund. Thank you, first of all. And we'll have an opportunity to participate in that tradition during our offertory at the end of the service. But I want to talk today about what it means to get committed to choice with more than our wallets. And that reproductive justice means more than just abortion access. It means a commitment to a whole spectrum of choices for a whole diversity of humankind. To be committed to a pregnant person's right to choose is a defense of democracy, and it is an act of faith. Let's step back in history for a bit around acts of faith for abortion across this country. I can talk most easily about my own tradition, that of Unitarian Universalism, but Unitarian Universalists did none of it alone. It was all in conjunction with other liberal religious institutions and persons. A whole decade before Roe v. Wade was passed, the UUA officially supported, quote, the legalization of abortion in cases of rape, incest, threat of the mother, physical or mental defect of the child, and other compelling reasons. In today's terminology, those sentences are a little bit less than inclusive, I will admit. But at the time, it was a huge and radical statement. And it took the form of not just words or finances, but bodies in the streets and bodies in the doctor's office, in the form of the clergy consultation service. The clergy, who were a part of this clergy consultation service, worked as a conduit between people who needed abortions and doctors who were willing to perform them, despite it being illegal at the time. The clergy consultation service was made up of many clergy across denominations, and they were still committed to reproductive justice following Roe v. Wade's decision, when those faith groups that included UUs, Methodists, Presbyterians, Reformed Jews got together and they formed the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. Their mission was and is to ensure that Roe v. Wade stands. Then, in the early to mid-1990s, a group of Black women created a more nuanced, complex, and holistic framework that called for reproductive justice, not just reproductive rights. These women had felt that the mainstream choice movement did not sufficiently address what they and their families and communities actually needed in order to be healthy. In their view, the choice movement was too focused on a legal right at the expense of focus on practical access to reproductive health services, which includes a lot more than simply access to abortion. Reproductive justice advocates generally agree on 4 principles. First, yes, people have to have the right not to have children. But also, second, people have the right to have children. Third, people have the right to raise children and do so in safe and healthy environments. And 4, every person has a right to health and self-determination regarding their bodies and sexuality, free from oppression and shame. In the years since, denominations and movements have adopted this languaging, this framework. The first was the UUA in 2015 with a statement of conscience on reproductive justice. And I want to quote the section on theological grounding. It says, the UUA supports gender equity, positive sexuality, diverse sexual expression, and the individual's right to make reproductive choices. Such choices are influenced by social and political systems, as well as factors such as racial, cultural identity, economic status, immigration and citizenship status, relationships with the justice system, health status, and ability. Our religious tradition directs us to respect the diversity of faith traditions that surrounds us, and insist that no singular religious viewpoint or creed guide the policies of our government. I didn't grow up with this affirming theology, and I am so grateful that it exists. It is life-affirming and life-giving. I grew up in the Evangelical Covenant Church, which in my memory never directly addressed the issue of abortion rights or reproductive justice from the pulpit. But I'll admit I made my own connections via a different portion of the theology that lives on in my work. They often talked about individual members or congregations as the body of Christ, the body of the church. I remember lots of teenage jokes about whether you were the hands or the feet or the stomach or the head or less mentionable in church parts of the body. But aside from listing body parts, what stuck with me even as I moved away from that strain of Christianity was the idea that we are all connected. If you prefer to look at it through an anthropological or evolutionary biology lens, we are all impacted by the choices of others. And that in turn impacts our choices. And that in turn influences our environments, which has impacts on us, and so on in a circle. In short, no one is alone. We are interconnected creatures. I am embodied in a particular flesh, but justice and liberation are not confined to a singular self. Instead, they are created and lived in and by and through community. And so when we uphold this idea of my body, my choice, we uphold the sacredness of another's body, and in turn, we affirm our own. By choosing as an act of faith to affirm the sacredness of another, of their body, of their bodily autonomy, we affirm the sacredness of their choice. And then we can recognize that a limitation or an infringement on their choice is an infringement on our own sacredness. It's a restriction of our belief in affirming the inherent worth and dignity of others, of our individual access to the holy through direct experience. So when we try to tell a woman who is pregnant by an abuser that she must carry to term, we affirm the abuse and we deny the sacredness of the woman. When we tell a man that he can't have access to health care he chooses for his own body because our medical industrial complex can't figure out how to separate sex and gender or biology and self, we affirm transphobia and deny the sacredness of who he is. When we tell our non-binary siblings whose contraception has failed that they must live with crushing gender dysphoria because we have taken their choice, we affirm oppression and we deny the sacredness of who they are. Affirming choice is affirming sacredness. And affirming the sacredness of another is never a sin. I know that's a big word in this house, the S word. But I believe that denying the sacredness of our siblings to have bodily autonomy is a sin. In the words of the Reverend Deborah Hafner, the sin is never sex and sexuality. The sin is sexual violence, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and misconduct. The sin is never homosexuality, but heterosexism, the presumption that there is only one way to love. The sin is not transgender people, but transphobia. The sin is forcing a pregnant person to carry a pregnancy to term and give birth against their will. The sin is denying their God-given gift of who they are, their own sexual and gender identity, or the information, services, and rights they need to make responsible decisions. End quote. So what will we do about it? How will we say no to the sin and yes to the sacredness of our siblings? It's about more than money, though money is part of it. It's about more than abortions, though abortions are part of it. It's about acts of faith each and every single day. It's not actually that different from the call you heard from this pulpit last week. Last week, Dr. Jelks challenged us to be good stewards of our democracy. Quote, to choose what is right, what is good, what is just, what is loving. Dr. Jelks is right, as he often is. Our democracy is under attack, and it will require every ounce of energy we have left after 2.5 years of pandemic to defend it. Just this week, we watched as the Senate did not pass the Voting Rights Act that would have helped bring our democracy closer to what it could be. Voting rights and reproductive justice are not divorced from each other. They are intricately and intimately interwoven. When we take away a person's right to choose how their body is used and abused, it is a much smaller thing to take away whether or not they are allowed to make a mark on a piece of paper in a voting box. Reproductive justice is a matter of liberation, and it is a matter of sacredness. It is the bold and audacious statement that says, your body is sacred, however you choose to use it. Your choice is sacred, whatever choice you make. And you are loved, however you identify and whatever path your life takes. Because quite simply, you are loved and you are sacred. And that is one of the biggest, scariest, most revolutionary statements that we can make in today's world. It won't always be easy to say or to do, and it will trigger anger in some and shame in others. Because if we do it right, if we do it actively, we are placing ourselves between oppressive practices and those who are most vulnerable. We are moving out from behind our comfort zones to hold guard against those who would take our sacredness. We must hold guard against those who would take away our sacredness. They are trying to take it away, and I actually don't just mean Roe v. Wade. Abortion access here in Michigan is already purposefully hard and complicated. And there's a 1931 law still on the books in Michigan that if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, abortion would be instantly illegal here in Michigan. I have colleagues across the state, particularly in Kalamazoo that I know of, who are working to rebuild those backroads networks, like the Clergy Consultation Service. And systems already exist, such as the National Network of Abortion Funds. And while these large-scale, systemic, and coordinated efforts are important, our individual commitment and willingness to affirm the sacredness of body and choice of one another are equally as important. Because I actually believe that in liberal religious circles, reproductive rights, let alone reproductive justice, have started to get taken for granted. The choice bund's been around for a while, right? It's doing its thing, it's all good. Well, we cannot take reproductive justice for granted. We cannot take the laws, the action, the organizing, the statements that make it possible for granted, because that assumption just isn't safe. And I mean safe in a bodily harm kind of way. It's not safe for the person who feels shamed because they had an abortion. It's not safe for the person who wonders if they will need one someday and if they'll be able to get it. It's not a safe assumption if we want to continue on the road towards liberation and justice. We must do more than work for safe or make safe assumptions. We must be loud and proud and, dare I say, joyful and persistent in our commitment. We can't just celebrate reproductive rights when somebody threatens to take them. We cannot just be reactionary or angry. What does it look like to joyfully proclaim the sacredness of our siblings? To joyfully embrace their choice with a smile and with a deep, compassionate love. That is my challenge for you on the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. To let reproductive justice be more than angry foot stomps and pounding on tables. To let reproductive justice live in your heart. To live in your smile. To live in your everyday actions so that every day we show up and say, we affirm your sacredness, and I will fight to uphold the sacredness of your choice because you are radically, wildly, and deeply loved. You are loved.
For the meditation before our prayer, I'd like for us to focus on trust. Trust. I got myself a little involved in the post that Reverend Greta Joe talked about earlier. I wanted to support her, and so I shared my Christian case for choice. Many people ask clergy all the time, Reverend Greta Joe, myself, and others, how can you be a religious leader and support choice? And as a Christian, I'll hear, how can you be a Christian, much less a Christian minister, and support choice? And the elevator pitch, which I can get to you before we even get to the next floor, is that Jesus trusted women. Jesus trusted women. Jesus trusted. And in my tradition, the Christian tradition that begins with the creation story, the divine spirit trusted in the stories, which may be myth and allegory, but still true to my heart. The divine spirit trusted. It's the first act of inclusion, as the human spirit was created and trusted to be stewards and interconnected in this world. A few weeks ago on Christmas Eve, you might remember that the challenge was to turn the world in a new direction, and that was echoed this morning by Reverend Greta Joe. And one of the ways that I said we turn that world is by following in the ancient stories that call us to trust. Trust the stories of the oppressed. So where in your lives are you being called to trust, my friends? Take a breath with me. Where have you been called to hear the stories that call you to trust? If the greatest commandment is love, not only in my Christian tradition, but across all of the great wisdom traditions, then it takes a lot of trust to embody that love. So where are we being called to trust? There are a few places in this world that are specifically for sanctuary. There are few places in this world that are specifically for stillness. There are few spaces in this world that are for resting and healing and listening and growing. And you, my friends, have chosen to be in one of those spaces this morning. Whether you are gathered in this physical cathedral of love in this temple of peace, or you are building that cathedral in your home and in your hearts from afar, embrace this choice to be here right now. You have nowhere to be but here. So take a breath and release. Breathe in all that makes this physical, spiritual, and liminal space sacred and holy. And breathe out and release the pressures and the expectations and the patterns of the world beyond these walls. There is something special and sacred that sets this time apart from the rest of the world, and you, my friends, have chosen to be part of it. So breathe again and release. Will you please join me for a moment of prayer? Spirit that time nor space can contain, witness of the ancestors and prophets among us, we call upon your holy presence now, though we know it has always been intimately present and woven into our being. You know our deepest thoughts. You feed our fiercest passions. You nurture our desperate longings. You hold our ancient hurt and pain passed down to us from the ancestors. And you stoke our wildest dreams passed on to us from the prophets. Before we were enfleshed into this world and were but a spark of imagination in the secrets of our first womb, you were knitting our place into the cosmos, into the threads of liberation and justice, will and grace, independence and interdependence. And then you set us free to live our lives as human beings most fully alive. This morning we hold the tension that being fully alive and being fully human is complex and messy and complicated. It weaves together the presence of joy and sadness, loss and love, hope and fear. And no more present is that reality than in this hour of shared worship, where we too bring those complex realities with us. We are complex beings, Spirit, living complicated lives, and as a community, we hold all of this as one of us offers up joy and thanksgiving for gratitude for Matt being successfully taken off of life support. And we continue to offer prayers for continued strength as he deals with the emotional impact of this trying health diagnosis. With sorrow, but also Thanksgiving, we celebrate the life of Thich Nhat Hanh, the prophet and inspiration in our world. We celebrate with one who welcomes their fourth grandchild. And we offer up prayers for healing and strength for our friend Linda Wilkie, who is home now and recovering at home. Spirit, give us the wisdom to hold all of these things as true, real, and authentic parts of being fully human and fully alive. And give us the courage and the will to discern what is right and what is good, knowing that the two may not always be the same. This morning we pray that you help us and help us help others to respect all of life, especially the lives of those seeking reproductive justice, who have been denied justice, who have had their intelligence questioned, their choices limited, and their freedoms denied. Spirit, help us to free our minds. Help us to grow and empower our souls and strengthen our commitments so that justice and compassion may always be our companions on this journey, and that all of us, and that each of us, and that every one of us may know the liberation of being fully human, fully alive, and fully loved. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
Thank you for being with us this morning. As we come towards the close of our time here together, I have a brief announcement. The church tours continue this Sunday after the service with Mary Holliday. Are you here? There's Mary. Mary will meet folks right down here at the front, sharing her 150 challenge project on the beautiful stained glass windows. Using photos taken by Bill Thompson, she's created a presentation of close-up views of all the figures that occupy our sanctuary space. It should last approximately a half an hour, and questions and comments are encouraged. So I encourage you to join if you are willing, able, and interested. On your way out this morning, whoa, we haven't been here that long. On your way out this morning, our wonderful ushers will be in the narthex with the offering plates. The offering is an invitation for you to physically manifest, act upon, make real your commitment to reproductive justice by contributing to our Choice Fund. Half our offertory plate today goes to the Choice Fund that is held here at Fountain Street Church. So I invite you to give generously and wholeheartedly as you are able. But mostly, as you go out today, I invite you to take one thing with you. Know that you are the sacred embodiment of divine love. You are the sacred embodiment of divine love, and so is every other human you meet this week. If you can live with that one truth, we will change the world this week. Just a little, but it'll be enough. Go knowing that you are loved and that you love. May it be so. Amen.